Hi guys, Learn to Business here. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're glad that you could be with us. First of all, Harry, how are things on your side? Have you got a tenant for that flat in Glasgow yet?
Not. I mean, it's getting quite frustrating, but I think it's just a case of being patient, isn't it? So it's not the end of the world. You don't have to put too much pressure on yourself, I guess. How are things with you?
Yeah, not so bad, thanks. I guess last time that we spoke since the last podcast, we had the government announcements talking about when the roadmap to exiting lockdown, and I was a bit disappointed that the gyms weren't going to be opening until the 12th of April, to be honest. I do miss those endorphins for breakfast. It just really helps my kind of mindset and just general energy levels. I have been using that Fit app though, which has been brilliant, a bit of a lifesaver. So I've done 150 consecutive days now of mainly yoga, but some strength training in there as well. But I just feel like I need a bit of a change of scenery. What I did notice actually when I was setting up is that this microphone, it's a Dune microphone, by the way, guys. I hope you like the sound. Can you see the foam cover there? There's a chunk missing out of it. So it was out the box, I think, for about 3 minutes. And my little girl decided to take a nice big bite out of the windshield there. That's the perils of having children, I guess. Everything that you have gets destroyed, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm not even angry anymore. I'll be more surprised if it didn't get destroyed. I think that's my mindset now.
Lee, it would be remiss of me if I just skipped over the fact that you just used the term endorphins for breakfast. I think a little bit of me died, and a big part of you should have died as soon as you said that.
Why? Endorphins for breakfast is the thing, isn't it? It's the thing. It's what gets you energized and motivated for the day.
Embarrassment.
That's
You need to
spoken
change
from
your vocab, mate. It's embarrassing.
That's spoken from someone who does not have endorphins for breakfast. That's exactly the mindset that happens. Anyway,
I did have endorphins for breakfast. Actually, I just don't have to go to a gymnasium to show everyone.
Well, I'm not one of these. I don't wear like a string vest showing my nipples or anything like that. Or I'm not one of these grunters in the gym. That
you're definitely there in the mirror.
Yeah, maybe in the mirror, but it's only for to watch the technique. You got to watch the technique. But I don't really have much muscle to show. You say I'm not one of those kind of guys, but. I'm missing the gym is the ultimate point. So not too long to go.
And how much faith have you got in the roadmap? Do you think it's realistic, or do you think we're going to still be having these conversations and we're going to be this time next year and there's been another variant? How much faith have you got?
I think it's necessary, to be honest. I think certainly the 12th of April date that was announced for at least part of the economy to reopen again. I think that's quite an important landmark. Interestingly, the Chancellor did extend furlough until the end of September for businesses. Not trying to read anything too much into that. I'm just very hopeful and that we can start to reopen the economy. How about yourself?
I think I've got more faith this time than I have done previously, because a lot of the stuff around the R number was restricted in terms of what we can do, but I think a big part of it is vaccinations, and to be fair, like, we seem to be absolutely smashing it with vaccinations and hitting all those targets. So I'm probably more optimistic this time than I have been previously. I don't know if that's part of me just mentally not being able to accept still doing this in a year's time. Not this, because the podcast is a treat, but I think surely within the next 6 months things will hopefully look really different, and you can't do anything other than be optimistic, I think, in my view.
Just in time for the Euros.
Exactly.
So today we welcome Jenny Alwood, who is the owner of Honeyblossom Bridal, which is a bridal shop based in Sale. She is a chartered accountant and tax advisor by background, but interestingly, she works a corporate job Monday to Wednesday and focuses on her business for the rest of the week. And she's got a great relationship with her employer, and they're extremely supportive of it, which was incredibly refreshing to hear, to be honest, because often we hear people who are worried about what the boss might say about them setting up a new business. So if that's you and you're worried about what your boss might say and you want to know how to deal with that, then please stay tuned. Jenny also has some great tips around managing a social media platform. So obviously, particularly in the modern era, a lot of it has had to move online, and she's very regimented with how she deals with that, and she has some great relationships with the designers as well. So please stay tuned and enjoy.
So welcome to the podcast, Jenny.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How does it feel to be within our bright blue abode? Is this the first podcast you've done, or are you a veteran at this point?
It actually is. I've done a few kind of presentations and things like that, but this is the first podcast in this whole new world that we're kind of living in at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, every man and his dog's got his own podcast, so we won't pretend we're doing anything original here. I would say the content is hopefully more helpful than most, but we'll let other people be the judge of that, and maybe you can let us know as well. So Jenny, obviously, so you've joined us today because you're the owner of Honeyblossom Bridal, and I guess we already knew each other, didn't we? Because from our more corporate jobs. So first of all, I'd just like to say thanks for agreeing to do the podcast. I accept you, as you mentioned before we started recording, you've not got anything better to do, which is as good a reason as any to join the podcast. but we are grateful, so thank you for that. So if we could just start by, I guess, going all the way back to the beginning, if you could give us an introduction to your business and what exactly you do, and then kind of what were you doing before that, and how did this all first come about? And I think that'd be a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Loads of questions in there. I guess if I talk about what I am now, so as you mentioned, I'm Honeyblossom Bridal. I'm a 5-star wedding dress and bridal accessories boutique based in Sale on the outskirts of Manchester. It all kind of started out what feels like a million years ago. 3 of my really close girlfriends got married in quite close succession, and I was chief bridesmaid for all of them. And being so close to this kind of wedding industry and wedding planning opened my eyes to an industry that was really happy and super dreamy. And I'd often find myself thinking, like, wouldn't it be great to work in an industry like this? And it was just a dream back then. I was working really hard in a tax role at EY, and it was going well. But as you guys know, in that kind of role, there are bad days. I'd had one particularly bad day, and I just got home and Googled part-time jobs, bridal boutique, Manchester. And I didn't expect anything to come up, but it did. And I thought, well, I'll just put my CV in and see what happens, and didn't think anything about it. Next thing, I was contacted by the boutique owner, invited to interview, which I did. And I was very honest, as I always am, laid my cards on the table. You know, I'm working full time, it's a demanding job, but I've got passion and transferable skills in things like excellent customer service, professionalism, sales. And it turned out that owner had started her career out in insurance, totally understood where I was coming from, and I got the job. It was minimum wage. I actually didn't care. I loved it. Most weekends I'd work there on a Saturday, sometimes Saturday and Sunday. It was exhausting on top of EY, but I loved meeting brides and helping them find their dream wedding gowns and accessories. So if I fast forward a little bit, what happened next was the owner was pregnant with her second child, and her first maternity leave hadn't been what she'd wanted, and so she wanted to approach it differently this time. She offered me 2 things: either buy a business or take a sabbatical from EY and go and manage the boutique on her behalf while she was on maternity leave. I was really flattered that she thought I would be up to it, and it was just the timing wasn't right. I was going for a promotion at EY, which I was excited about, and she told me, okay, that's fine, but she would sell to another party, and so I quit at that point, just purely because I knew that our relationship was unique with our similar backgrounds, and I didn't want to start over, and my promotion case was taking more and more of my time, and I was worried about burning out. So that was the end of that chapter. I got the promotion, which I was pleased about. Time goes by. I got engaged myself, which was really exciting, but there was still this niggle in my mind about working in the wedding industry. And I spoke to Dave, my other half, about it all the time, dreaming of having my own boutique. And he must have had enough of it one day and just said, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then in and amongst trying to plan a wedding, the planning for opening Honeyblossom Bridal started.
Sounds like you're not put off by hard work. So to begin with, when you had that part-time job, was that a case of you still working 5 days a week, and then you working every weekend or every other weekend at the bridal boutique?
Yeah, every weekend. every weekend. every
Wow.
weekend and 5 days a week at EY. So yeah, it was pretty tough going, but it was almost as if the part-time job at the boutique that I was working for, it was wonderful because everyone's so happy. It's an exciting environment. So even though, I get home on a Saturday night, Dave was great. He made my tea, glass of wine, perfect. But, yeah, I was quite tired. But I'm used to working hard, so it was no problem.
And it's a quick one in terms of actual timeframes then. So how long ago was it when you parted company with the other boutique that you were working for?
It must have been 2014.
2014, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So you've been going quite some time now. Is it kind of 4 or 5 years or so on your own? Is that fair?
Yeah, so the boutique opened November 16. So this year will be our 5-year anniversary, although the last year has felt a little bit like a write-off.
And can you just tell us a quick about that kind of first day? What was your shop or your kind of boutique at that point in time compared to what it is now? How did you open?
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like such a long time ago now. When we found premises and everything else, there was quite a lot of work to do. My husband's quite handy, so that was great. On our first day, I had maybe 20 wedding dresses, not many, but enough to kind of get started. I had no reputation, no one knew me. And now, almost 5 years later, I'm 5-star rated, the only 5-star rated boutique in Sale. And I'm working with slightly different designers, all still British, which is really important to me. And yeah, it's more like 60 also wedding dresses in the boutique at any one time, but at the moment I'm sitting in an empty shop whilst things are kind of getting back to normal.
There must have been a lot of work in that first period in terms of getting yourself, I guess, finding the right place to open a shop in Manchester, because I guess you've got some areas where there's loads of them, some areas where there's very few. So I guess how did you first, I guess, find the location that you wanted to go for a shop, and then how did you go through finding the exact place and then kitting it out and buying it and that type of thing? How was that process for you?
Lots of research. I was living in Sale at the time, and so we'd always thought about Sale. At the time, there was quite a few bridal boutiques out here. It's your kind of age-old accounting exam question where someone's starting out a business and they have an opportunity of either buying somebody else's business or starting from scratch. I did look at another business to buy that instead of starting out from scratch. It was out in Hale, so it was a little bit further out. And for a couple of reasons, it didn't come off. The designers weren't quite what I was looking for. The rent was sky high, all kinds of things really. But actually, it was the woman who I was speaking to about that particular business that suggested to me about maybe potentially going part-time with my job at EY. Her background was she used to be a lawyer, and it was something that I hadn't thought about until that point. So it was really interesting speaking to her. But anyway, we decided that business wasn't for us, and we started on looking at empty units in Sale. I wanted it to be close. I grew up in a family business where our home was very close to the business, and I knew the advantages of that, and kind of things like not getting worried about being stuck on motorways and things like that. I just didn't want it. We saw what felt like a lot of units, and we finally settled on this one, which is our home on Washway Road. It is a main road, but we do get the benefit of, people are stuck at the traffic lights and they, look around and they see the boutique. So although it can be, a little bit busy, the road, at least we get that kind of passing traffic day in, day out.
Your business that you're starting off is obviously a lot more capital intensive in that first part of it compared to a lot of businesses that I guess are starting at the minute in lockdown. It's people for the most part making things at home, which you can do relatively cheaply, and then most of the work it's just your time. It's building up a following. But you will have needed, I assume, quite a big cash injection at the start. So how did you fund the business to begin with, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, savings. So we were saving for a wedding and we were saving for the business. So it was two separate pots of savings. Basically, you know, everything that I made from my other from EY was funneled into a savings pot for the business. Coming from a kind of financial background, I'd mapped out all of the costs and where the money might come from. Dave did loan me some money to start out as well. That all got paid back. But yeah, it is very expensive, this kind of business to start out. The stock is one of the most expensive things that that you need to consider. And so, yeah, it was just kind of saving, not really having much fun, but hoping, you know, it would all be worth it in the end. So that's how we went about it. Good old fashioned saving.
Could I ask a quick question about the relationship between yourself and the designers then? How does it, because you just mentioned then your stock is the most expensive thing, and you say you started off with 20 dresses, you know, that number can get pretty big quite quickly. How does it work with, you know, choosing the right designers for you? And I assume you take ownership of, does that sound like you take ownership of the stock rather than, for example, you're a like a sales agent effectively for those designers? Is that right?
That's right. I think it's a really big misconception about the industry that boutiques like mine get given stock for free. I would love that. That's not true. All of the wedding dresses in the boutique belong to me. Not one of them fits me, which is even more depressing. But yeah, so I did a lot of research about designers. I knew a lot anyway from my work in the bridal industry previously. And it works on radiuses. So, you know, if somebody has a particular designer and they're in a small radius to you, you can't have that designer. I came very quickly around to the fact that I wanted to deal with British designers and I didn't want to deal with sales agents, which are quite common in this industry. I wanted to be able to have that access to designers direct. And what I found was, especially with the British designer, you could speak to the designer direct. Yes, they may have a sales team, but you didn't necessarily have to deal with them. I met the designers, you know, kind of when I contacted them, telling them what I was going to do. I met them. We talked about styles and our different approaches and objectives and what brides we were looking for. And I started off with 3 designers. I still have 3 designers. One of them has changed. But the other 2 have been with me from day one, and they've been wonderful all the way through. They've understood when things have been tough, and equally have been great all the way through the COVID pandemic and the closures that that's brought as well. So I keep my designers close. I think it's important to have that personal relationship because you are working with teams of designers over a long period of time whilst people wait for their wedding dresses, and it's important to have that kind of relationship where you know, if either of us need help, then we're just on the other side of the phone.
It sounds like you've had quite a lot of background thinking. Obviously, your experience working part-time was probably invaluable, really, when you come to, you know, I've got enough to buy 20 dresses. First of all, I'm going to think about who the customers actually are, and I'm going to cater directly for them, rather than sometimes people just, you know, if they build it, they will come kind of approach. It sounds like you've really thought about things, and, you know, those weekends that you worked, they were very tiring, but, you know, you're still 5 years later, and I think that's testament to the hard work that you've put into your business. I think it really is.
Yeah, I think sometimes I am maybe a little bit too risk averse. I like to make exactly. I like to make reasoned decisions, and so although, you know, sometimes admittedly I can get swept up in beautiful fabrics or gorgeous wedding dresses that you see out there. But thankfully, I do have Dave with me most of the time to keep me grounded and making sure that I'm not making any decisions which are too bold.
Well, one of the points that we always ask people, or we always have in mind to ask people, is kind of what is your why? What's the reason why you've decided to set up your own business? Kind of what keeps you going? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess it's come out to me pretty frequently throughout what you've said, even just so far, of this is where your passion lies. So even when it was just a part-time job rather than a business you owned, you didn't mind giving up what would have been your free time to do this, because this is what makes you happy. This is almost kind of what you live for. This is the stuff that you're getting out of bed to do this. And even now, when I guess you've got a part-time job, it's not an easy part-time job. It's me and Lee both know from having previously or still working in similar roles that it's a really demanding, challenging job. You're still doing that alongside of running your own business, which is massive. So would you say that it's the fact that it's something that you love that makes it feel like, although it's hard work, although it's a lot of time, you're almost happy doing that because you're doing what you love?
Yeah, I think my parents, before they retired, both had their own business. My brother has 2 of his own businesses. It's almost in my DNA that I was gonna end up, doing something for myself. It was just thinking about finding it. I didn't know what it was, and it was only when my friends started getting married that I got exposed to this industry that I thought, wow, this is really exciting. Everybody's really happy, and I'd love to be part of that. And I loved helping planning their weddings. I loved planning my own wedding, and I thought, what if I could be part of somebody's loads of people's weddings? If there was another way that I could do that, that'd be wonderful. And so that's what I've got with the boutique. I get to meet brides every single day, apart from when we're not in the pandemic, and I get to hear about their plans, and everyone's so different. There is no real cookie cutter wedding anymore. Everyone's having really different things, and so it's just wonderful. And for someone like me who's a little bit nosy and I like to find out about people, it's perfect, because the brides love talking about what they've got planned, as well as how they met their other half and everything like that. So yeah, definitely something that I love. And I'm straight out of bed in the morning, desperate to get here and get brides and dresses.
We skimmed over it quite quickly, but I think you said you were 3 separate people's chief bridesmaids. I mean, you must be a great person for that many people to hold you in that high regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was surprised as well, to be honest. But yeah, I think I've always been an organizer, I think, which probably put me in good stead for 3 of my friends. But yeah, it was just great. And then I had all 3 of them for my big day as well. So yeah, I think I probably have some skill set which is probably perfect for a chief bridesmaid. But yeah, it was great.
Could I ask the question around how you transitioned to part-time with EY, and how did you have any reservations to kind of say coming clean, but just trying to broach that topic with them? Because, and just to frame this slightly, because even like last week I was speaking to a friend, and she has a business idea and she's worried what work might think if she's starting it off on the side. And you've been in this position before, so it'd be great. Any kind of tips that you have for people listening there as well would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always had a great relationship with my performance partner. So she and I had always spoken about lots of different things. I'd never really spoken about, thinking about doing something on my own. And so when I did broach this with her, it was easy for me to have that conversation because we had such a good relationship. She was surprised because I'd got my promotion, I was doing well in the role that I was in. Everything was very fast paced for me. But she did take it away to the partner group and HR to figure out whether it would be possible. She was excited for me. And, from her perspective, she was hoping that it would work out. I have to admit, I was actually quite surprised that the response came back as, yes, you can do this. It wasn't anything particular about EY. It was just because I didn't know anybody else who had that kind of unique setup. But, I was very honest and explained, I'd want to do it like this. 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, those would need to be quite strict. And this is how I'd like to kind of carve down my current role and how it maps onto 3 days a week. So I'd done a bit of, there's probably a bit of a running theme here, but I'd done a bit of planning before I had that conversation to kind of set out, you might be concerned about this, but this is how I'm thinking about it. So, the question was raised about if EY said no, then what would you do? And my response was, well, I'm still going to do it anyway. So I think I was surprised that they were so positive about it. But now, 4 years on, it's just normal. Everyone accepts those are the days that I work. And, it's just really similar to anyone who has children or other reasons why they want to work part-time. It was just a little bit different. But yeah, I was surprised about the support that I received, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, it's really refreshing to actually hear that, because often, employers can make it difficult for people who want to do something on their own, even though it's completely unrelated as it is in your case. But, not, as you say, it's what's the difference between going part-time for other commitments and setting up your own business. So I think it's brilliant that they've been so supportive, and obviously that helps you as well. So that's great to hear.
I suspect there's a stark difference between, you obviously had a lot of experience from working in a wedding shop part-time. I suspect there's a stark difference between that and owning your own business and trying to get to grips with that. Starting out on your own, it's not like you had a business partner. What were the real challenges that you had at the beginning in terms of getting that business up and running?
Can I say everything?
By all means.
Yeah.
I think, everything. But one of the biggest things, looking back on it, was getting my name out. It's almost something that I didn't think too hard about at the time. And then as things were starting to progress, I thought, oh my gosh, well, how will anyone even know that I exist? And so getting my name out there was one of the biggest challenges. When you set up an Instagram page and you've only got 5 followers, and those 5 followers are your mum and some of your mates, that's really hard. And so keeping at it when you feel like sometimes you're speaking out and no one is listening to you, and you're doing loads of things and you think, well, does anyone even know I'm here? I think that was a lot harder than I anticipated, to actually get people to know and recognize the brand.
I think me and Lee can definitely agree with those early days of posting things and no one says anything, and you've spent hours and hours creating in our sense these videos, and we're like, this is some absolute gold in this, and look at these animations I've created, and then not a single person says anything about it. And you're like, no one, certainly people didn't get 10 minutes into that video on cash flow or something like that. But how did you manage to go then from where you were then to where you are now? What kind of advertising did you do to try and get your name out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, running theme, loads of research, loads of planning about, well, first of all, what can I do for free in terms of it's not going to cost me any money, and it might cost me a lot of time, but I can at least do it for free. And then there's the paid aspect. In terms of the free stuff, it was obviously setting up the social media accounts, getting listed on Google My Business, getting listed on Google Maps, signing up for directories, so local and wedding directories, networking. So, getting to know the local businesses around here, that was so important, because word of mouth is something that you can't buy it. And even now, I ask all of my brides where they find out about me, because it's really important for me to be able to track actually where are the brides coming from. And even now I'll be, I go to a physio slightly down the road, and she mentioned you to me, and it's someone that I might have met at a networking event 18 months ago or something like that, but they just they just remember, which is really lovely. So that's all the free stuff, as well as, you know, I can see you guys are in merch today, loving that. But wearing merch everywhere. Always having business cards on me, which is, you know, a little bit easier when we weren't in lockdown and things like that. You know, you'd be in a bar, you'd be speaking to someone and they'd be like, oh, well, you know, my friend's just got engaged. Oh, well, here's my card. They'll probably lose it on a night out, but whatever, you know. For every girl that loses it, there might be another one that manages to find it in a handbag the next day. So there's all the free things. And then on the paid things, it really is experimentation. So lots of people will tell you different things work. So whether that's Google ads, Instagram ads, Pinterest ads, Facebook ads, wedding shows, print, it really was experimentation, and learning from each of those little experiments, so that, as you know, where I am now is that I know what works for my business and I just keep at that. So yeah, a real mixture of things. It's a little bit tempting to feel like if I'm not doing all of the things, that I'm not getting all of the brides. But I think that's a myth. I think you just got to focus on what's right for you and your business, because it'll be different for everyone.
I think that's really important in terms of you asking brides the question of, how did you hear from me? It's that constant feedback that we've talked about before, isn't it, Lee? Of I can just act in my silo and think I'll just do all of these things and it will probably work. But making sure you're asking your customers and finding out, well, which of these things is working? So therefore, how should I focus my time is really important. Because I think, especially with your situation, Jenny, I think it's fair to say spare time is probably a bit of an issue. So you need to make sure you use that time as well as you can. So yeah. you mentioned that you've found your key places to spend your time. So where are you seeing your most effective advertising being?
Well, there's two main things. I would perhaps kind of band local and referrals together. So that's a big driver. And then over 50% of my brides come through Google. Yeah, it's the machine, but it works.
Well, I think it's just, if you step into the shoes of who your customers are, what's the first thing you're going to do if you're looking for something? Is you're going to Google it. And then if you see something come up and it's got crap reviews, you'll move on to the next one. If it's got good reviews, then maybe at that point you'll go onto the Instagram to get a bit more idea of it. So how much are you using? I don't think we've never used Google Ads before, and I guess we're probably not the type of business that would, given the type of things that we're doing. So is it expensive to use Google Ads, and how does it generally work?
Is it expensive is a great question. But what I put into it, I get a good return. It does take a lot of management. So there's a whole dashboard that's online, which you go into, you can edit things and change things. And you need to stay active on that to track, you know, if people put in, I don't know, pink wedding dress in Google, do you come up? Do they click you? Or if people type in like bridesmaids dresses, do I come up and do they click me? Because every time they click me, I'm paying for that click. But for me, bridesmaids dresses is not what I do. And so I need to keep on top of things like that to ensure that actually I want you, Google, not to put my name out for bridesmaids dresses. So it is a whole dashboard that I look at weekly to see, you know, what's happened in the last week, what changes do I need to make? So it's quite intense. The amount of money that I spend with Google, I actually get my own strategist with Google. So they call me maybe on a monthly basis to kind of take me through the different things that they've added to Google Ads, because as you would expect, it is something that changes really quickly. So that kind of service is invaluable, because you know, trying to keep up with that stuff normally would just be impossible. So having that access to someone to be able to guide me through those changes and what may and may not work is great. So is it expensive? It's a hard question to ask. I feel like for my business, I get the return that I need from what I invest.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair to say. Is it expensive? Was a stupid question. It's what you get out of it. But it is my fault. Are you getting a return out of it? Any advertising is expensive if you're not getting anything back. And
Yeah.
if you feel like it's something that's actively giving you a return, then it absolutely makes sense. And to me, I didn't realize that Google gave you that strategist who speaks to you directly. I assumed that it would just be complete machine interface and it's something you use yourself and it's almost like there's no people behind there. But that sounds really good. That sounds like it'd be really helpful.
Yeah, because I'm going to ask if you've ever thought about having some kind of social media marketing person, but I guess if your main channel is Google and you've got this humanoid to speak to, then you probably don't need it. Is that fair? Or have you thought about actually, this is taking up too much of my time, I'm going to outsource it to a social media specialist, or is it not needed?
The social media thing is really interesting. I know a lot of businesses that offer that kind of social media management. I'm part of a kind of independent bridal retailers group where we talk about things like this. Even though we're all essentially in competition with each other, we recognize that there are advantages to being part of a group where we can share ideas and float different things. I've been approached by X person. Has anyone used them before? What are the results like? With the kind of social media management, from my perspective, I feel like right now I can handle that on my own. I do post daily, but I have a strong kind of method that I follow in terms of what I post every day. Admittedly, I don't do any of the photographs or any of the video. That's all done by my husband. He identified quite quickly that I'm terrible with a camera, so he does all of that. So I think that probably takes the weight off a little bit because he's creating the content, or I'm telling him what content to create, and then I can post it afterwards. So it is, the social media side is probably a little bit of teamwork between me and my husband.
What's quite interesting from your perspective is that obviously you do have quite a strong financial background as well. So I guess could you just give a bit more background to your qualifications and how that has put you in good stead for your business?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an economics graduate. Went into corporation tax as a graduate at KPMG. Did my chartered accountancy exams there and my chartered tax advisor exams there. So yeah, quite a lot of working very hard to get those qualifications. And my husband's the same as well. So he's a chartered accountant and chartered tax advisor. So that stuff, I think, is really important. That it's just meant that there's been time that we haven't had to spend on things like, well, how do we treat expenditure, or what are our kind of deadlines for doing accounts or tax returns and things, which you just haven't had to think about because it's bread and butter for us. It's just things that, well, I mean, some of the things you don't know off the top of your head because you haven't looked at them since you've been doing your exams, but you at least know where to find them and how to find the answer and how to find the right answer quite quickly. So it definitely has put me in a bit of an advantage, I think, in terms of setting up the business. I think a lot of people agonize about the finance and accounting side. Even if I look at my younger brother, he did software engineering at uni, and he doesn't have any kind of finance or accounting background. So some of the questions he asked me are just, I know the answer straight off. And he's like, how do you know this stuff? Because, well, spent years of my life studying accounting and tax, but you could very quickly see how you could spend hours kind of poring over legislation and things like that and trying to decipher it without that kind of background.
Yeah, and you can tell, like, when you were talking about the advertising expenditure, you kind of think about things as return on investments as well. So it came across that it's amended the way that you analyze things, which I think that's what Harry and I are seeing. When people who don't have financial backgrounds, how can they really critically analyze something as well as they need to? So I think that it just sounds like a really important skill to have.
Well, I must admit, at the time when you're doing those exams and you're learning about how to draw up a set of accounts from scratch, when you're on a grad scheme with a big four, you think, well, when am I ever going to need this? You're not doing that type of work day to day when you're working for an accountancy firm. But yeah, it was worth it.
But do you actually involve accountants at all? So, for example, for probably not for your tax, but for accounts, or do you use like software or Excel? What kind of background tools do you use, I guess?
I'm a little bit basic when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm a spreadsheet queen. So I literally just put everything through spreadsheets. I know that there's lots of different things out there in terms of software, which admittedly I haven't explored because the business, I know enough about the business to be able to kind of cut through it quite quickly. But I know, even things like if you sign up with a bank for their business bank account, then they will offer, 3 different types of accounting software. It's been on my list for a while. I'm thinking about, well, maybe I should sign up for something like that. But equally, my spreadsheets work fine. So if it's not broke right now.
Yeah. I guess is it?
I love a spreadsheet. I would never convince someone to not use one.
Harry's the person I speak to when I'm trying to find out a fancy formula, because I'm okay at Excel, but I'd say I'm amateur. I'd consider myself as.
I use it
I think you're being generous to yourself, though.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right.
No, I do use them for everything. So
Me too. It's so good.
Accounts, tracking brides, tracking stock, tax stuff, everything. So yeah, I'm a big spreadsheet fan.
And fast forward into today, then obviously we're in very different times, and so if we've kind of talked about, I guess, the past 4 years prior to where we were last year. So can you just give a bit more around how COVID has impacted you and the business and how you've adapted?
Sure. So we fall under the umbrella of non-essential retail. So every time that a lockdown's happened, then that's meant closure for me. I'm in the boutique now. You can see it's completely empty. All the stock has been stored safely, just to stop it from gathering dust whilst I'm closed, and to stop it getting sun damaged and things like that. So each time that I've had a lockdown, then all the stock has been stored. And in terms of, outside of that, all I've done is kind of kept in touch with my brides. There's been a few things that people have bought along the way, just from, they've been in for a previous appointment, typically accessories, where they don't need measuring or anything like that, which I've picked up. But mostly it's just been being a shoulder to cry on for brides, because it's been really tough for any bride that's had to reorganize her day 2, 3, even 4 times. I'm really lucky and fortunate to have my job at EY, so I haven't had to worry about a lot of things that other suppliers have had to worry about. So I do consider myself very fortunate, as well as being able to benefit from the government grants. So it literally has been, whilst the lockdowns have been on, is shutting up shop, keeping up with social media and things like that, because people are still looking at stuff. And then even when I was able to open between the lockdowns, it's been at reduced capacity to allow for cleaning between appointments. So it's been really different, kind of speaking to a bride whilst you're in a face mask, she's in a face mask and a wedding dress, whoever thought we'd be in this situation. I've had, brides stood in the window with their bridesmaids and family stood outside looking at her in the dress in the window, because they can't all come in because that's not within the rules. So it's been interesting, but actually all of the brides and their families have been so understanding about what can and can't happen, which has been really great.
I guess the impact on your business is relatively obvious in terms of when these lockdowns come in and you just have to shut up shop. But what's the impact been on you? Because what we've already covered is this is your passion. This is what you really look forward to doing. How have you coped with that essentially just being put on hold and more of your focus, I presume, naturally being on your job with EY? How have you managed with that?
Yeah, so I continue to work 3 days a week. There was a little bit of time in the last lockdown just before Christmas where I upped my hours to 4 days a week. It was usually a busy time at EY during that time, but then went back down to 3. I quickly found out on 4 days a week that I'm not sure I could ever go back to more than 3 days. Especially working from home, you know, it's really difficult. You don't get that social interaction that you get in the office. But yeah, I've missed it so much. I miss brides. Thankfully, you know, this kind of time we have social media, we have phones, like email. I'm still hearing from lots of brides. We're still really excited. So I still get my, I suppose, my fix that way. But what's been really nice is the you know, despite everything, people are still being really excited about their weddings. And I did have quite a few brides that got married in that really short period where you could, but could have only really small weddings, which was so lovely actually to hear about. Because at the end of the day, like, this is an industry built on relationships and people being able to make that commitment to each other. So it's been nice that, you know, it hasn't been a total pause. We have seen brides still get married. So as much as, you know, I haven't been able to get as much as I would normally do in terms of, you know, seeing brides and things like that, it's not completely paused. And the rest of the time we've just been decorating the house.
Yeah.
Like everyone, causing shortages in plaster, etc.
Yeah. So in terms of the next 12 months, then hopefully, obviously, we come out of the more stringent lockdown. And is it the 12th of April for you guys? Is that the big day? Yeah. So kind of what you're hoping for in the next 12 months for yourself and the boutique?
Yeah, well, I suppose if I think about 12 months from now, I would love to be back to, so at the moment, I have an hour between every single appointment to clean everything for the next appointment, in order to, you know, kind of make it as COVID safe as possible. If I kind of fast forward a year from now, I'd really hope that I don't have to do that anymore and I can see more brides during a day. I spend less of my time cleaning. And I would hope, you know, at the moment there is a restriction, even when I'm back, of if a bride brings a guest, then they have to be in the same household or social bubble. I would love to go back to the days when, you know, actually a bride can bring in a mum and a bridesmaid, and that there's no even question about that. Of course, they would want to come. So yeah, back to normal type appointments, back to all smiling, happy faces, and everyone being really excited about, you know, their wedding plans, and just being as successful as I was before the lockdown, before the first lockdown, because actually, you know, this time last year, it was going great guns. We were kind of in that sweet spot where the business had been open for just over 3 years and everything was just starting to fall into place. So yeah, I'm very keen to get back to that and do better.
It's clear that you're running this business on your own. You're the owner, but you're also the only employee who's working. Have you ever considered getting someone else in to help you, sort of similar to when you were working in that part-time role, maybe having someone like that just to take a bit of the burden off of you?
Yeah, it's really hard because I'm a perfectionist. I have such high standards. Anyone that's worked with me at EY will know that. And so for me, right now, kind of taking on staff feels a little bit like I'd have to relinquish a little bit of control. And so if I think about what success looks like for Honeyblossom, it would be for me to continue to be a 5-star rated bridal boutique, and for, you know, the diary to be filled kind of months in advance. It's a really difficult question, because I know at some point, in order to grow, that will need to happen. But it would need to be the right person, definitely.
I can see that, because you've spent so much time in, and you've built it from nothing essentially. So it's kind of your baby, isn't it? You've built it in exactly the way you want it to be. In terms of the main parts of the podcast, unless I'm incorrectly, I think we've covered most of it, and I think we're probably on to the end part where we excitedly look to you for any book recommendations that you might have. I mean, by all means, go for fiction, but helpfully, if you could go for something that you think has made a real difference in helping you start and run a business, then that would be really good.
Okay, so cards on the table. I don't read many business books, but as I said, I'm an economics grad, and so I love anything that's about real life economics. So like for economics, or the Undercover Economist. I did actually read one business book way before I even thought about opening Honeyblossom. I didn't even know that my future was in wedding dresses at that point, which is probably a little bit outdated now. I even brought it, which is this.
Well, show and tell.
Yeah, anyone can do it, which is actually the story of the people that opened Coffee Republic. So it probably is a little bit outdated now, but I found it really inspiring. And it's not really dry. It's, you know, kind of their real life experience. And I guess when I thought about, if they asked me about books, what am I going to say? Because I don't really read many. What I would say, which I don't know that many businesses are aware of, is that there's loads of stuff out there that's good. So that's why I love what you guys are doing. But, you know, there's things like that the Business Growth Fund do for small business owners, which is free. And things like Google Garage, it's not in Manchester anymore, but I think all of the content you can still get online. There's loads of stuff out there which is specifically aimed at small business owners, which it took me I was a little bit hesitant about going on them, but I kind of felt like, you know, it was the beginning of the business, it was a little bit quieter. And so I had the time, so I thought, well, why not? We'll just give it a go. And it actually made me focus on things that I'd perhaps put to the side as, I don't want to think about that, or it's not important. So have a look at what's out there and what's available, and what you can learn from those different training courses, because it may feel like a little bit cheesy kind of going on a business course, but there's stuff like one of the ones I went on, which was funded by Business Growth Fund. All we did, it was kind of like a group of 6 of us, maybe 6 business owners, and we were all asked to go on each other's website and suggest things. And it was horrific. It was absolutely horrific. But one of the things that came out was, for my website, why don't you have a book online function? I don't know. I don't know why I don't have one. But yeah, you're right. Why don't I have one? And that was one of the best decisions that I made, is to have a book online function, because people look at wedding dresses at night, and then they could just click through, see when I've got availability, book, they're done. So, you know, I owe that little button to that business course.
I can't believe you started by bashing business books and then went straight into economics books for starters. Like, that's way less interesting. And to be fair, I don't sit around reading business books all day. I think there's books that you can read, and you can take the message in whichever way you want, isn't there? And I think that book that you mentioned, even though it's out of date, I imagine quite a lot of the principles are still relevant. The next point, I guess you've spilt onto some of that just then, was in terms of people who are just starting their own business, of which there are plenty at the minute, given the lockdowns, etc. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out at the beginning of the business?
So many things. So obviously I've spoken about the kind of training and stuff that's out there, which is just at your fingertips. It may seem obvious, but be passionate about something that you're doing, because that's what will keep you driven and focused. Don't say yes to everything. It's so tempting just to say, yeah, okay, that's fine. But not everything is right for your business. Try things, but learn from them and move on. I've already talked about how much I love spreadsheets. And then my last one, which I think that, again, probably coming from a Big Four accountancy background, is networking. Like, it was always a big thing when I was on my graduate scheme about, oh, you need to network, you need to build your network. I never really thought about it. But then when I got into this business, it's just as important because of that word of mouth thing that we spoke about before. Yeah. You know, people talk, people see each other. There's a really strong, like, kind of Trafford Women in Business group here, which I'm part of. But all the local businesses, you know, they get to know each other, you know, give each other shout outs on various social media platforms. All of our merchandise is done by a company that's just down the road. So I think that kind of source of recommendation, you can't buy it. And it is something that you just have to spend the time doing, but it's totally worth it.
A big thank you to Jenny for all of your time, and all the very best for post-lockdown era. And I hope that it's a very fantastic one for you.
Oh, me too. Thanks so much for having me. It's been fab kind of speaking to you guys, and you don't often get time to reflect on how things have gone. So thanks for giving me that opportunity.
I think as well, some of the points you've made and some of the tips that you've given for me and Lee alone, really helpful, and hopefully it helps all of those news businesses out there. I think some really good stuff that we've covered. So again, thanks a lot for joining.